Let's go. Greg's got the news, Danny's got the flair. One talks the cloud, the other's out there. Servers spinning, bites keep grinning. Tech talk laughs, let's get the show winning. Cyberwise guys, we're cracking the code. Tech and chuckles on overload. Urge your dreams, cybersecurity schemes. It's the podcast you need, like coffee and memes.
Welcome to CyberWise, guys, where we break down the latest trends, threats, and technologies in cybersecurity, helping you stay one step ahead and cyberwise. Today, we are joined by Suzanne Lovett, a security specialist director at Microsoft who works at the forefront of helping organizations strengthen their security resilience and increasingly AI-driven world. Suzanne brings deep expertise in modern security strategy, platform integration, and helping customers navigate the rapidly evolving threat landscape through Microsoft security ecosystem. Welcome to the program, Suzanne. How are you?
Welcome, Suzanne.
Thank you.
I'm sure our listeners would love to hear from you.
Yes.
So what is it that you do with Microsoft?
I do. You were spot on with I lead a team of security specialists, and they work with our mid-market customers, a lovely group of folks dispersed between specialist-focused resources and engineering-focused resources. So
Nice.
those that go technically deep and those that balance the solutioning and more of the business value for the customers. Been here 14 years. So I've seen a number of roles where the last 8, I've been leading teams in that way in our mid-market, almost exclusively in mid-market here most of the time. I did start with our larger customers, but I have a passion for this segment and I've grown with the tools. I will say that from the early
Nice.
days of baseline identity, SCCM, like I remember being a Windows core infrastructure specialist when I first started. So a long journey with Microsoft, but it's been thrilling. And I have an amazing team of folks that support me and support our customers behind me.
You mentioned
Nice.
the mid-market. Do you feel like for Microsoft, this is the main focus now, or where do you feel the biggest impact of your work now and the focus that Microsoft puts on the market today?
Oh gosh. Well, I do feel that this segment of customers are the growth engine, just hundreds of thousands of customers that we touch in this space across the world. Both our SMB and then small, medium, and corporate customers comprises a huge number of customers and definitely is seen as the growth engine for Microsoft. So we focus a tremendous amount of time, energy, effort, programs, resources into our space. So yeah, I think that Microsoft views this as a very critical component from a customer perspective.
Excellent. So, Suzanne, I want to switch it up a little bit. So let's talk a little bit about what you see with your customers for perception versus reality here. So when you look at Microsoft telemetry, and what I mean by that is not just specific telemetry that you see in a signal, but I'm talking about what you see as far as the security inputs that a customer has versus what they see. What do you see as the biggest gap between what organizations think their security posture is and what it actually is?
I think not only do I see this, but I was reading recently, there seems to be a disparity sometimes between how leadership and executive leadership view a security posture versus the field level engineers who touch these things every
Right.
day. They maybe see things with a little more filter and understand the difficulty that they face every day. And they actually will project that there's probably a little more difficulty than what leadership sometimes perceives.
Yeah.
So we see that, like that remains consistent. Although with great customer relationships, we can have honest conversations with senior leadership to help bridge that gap and help clear understanding there. I think there are so many tools built in now that allow customers to see things like a secure score or see their security posture. I do think that it's incumbent upon us to share with customers all the time and continually be educating them on how they can look at those things. Because in the day to day, I think what we observe is folks get siloed, folks get busy, and coming back to maintaining or doing check-ins on what does secure score look like right now? What is the security posture drift right now? I think those are really important things to underscore continually, even though they may seem very basic. They're constant reminders and things that we like to educate our customers on.
And that's even more true when you add something like AI, like Security Copilot, which by role can look at your where your posture is.
Absolutely. And I think what I love most about that is that you're now equaling the playing field so that all levels of administrator in the org who have access can serve themselves information at something that's
Right.
digestible for them, right? So they can use
Correct.
natural language query to ask questions that will give them back information that they can actually digest and act upon. I was gonna say that the magic trifecta of the Defender products now even I say trifecta, it's beyond that because Security Copilot built into each part of the stack in the emerged experience rather than the
Hmm.
standalone. I mean, you have access to it and its agents across the stack right now. So it's accessible to everybody to be able to get
Right.
that visibility and then
Right.
actually prompt for, okay, what next? And it will make
Hmm.
those recommendations, which again, helps lift everybody to a level to be able to take action on what has been raised as something that needs to be taken action on.
You've mentioned the gap between the engineers and the decision makers. Are there anything or any signals or matrix that consistently surprises the decision makers, the leaders within organization around what's real and what they perceive to be real?
I don't know that there's a specific matrix that raises that. I think one thing that's interesting now, most specifically because the business is very, very interested in generative and agentic AI, right? So
Hmm.
if you think about things like as agents proliferate, business leaders and those on the executive leadership side can quickly understand that they're going to have some way to control that agent. And that
Hmm.
agent represents an identity. So there are ways to distill that information to help an executive quickly see that if you have 20 agents to one human and you're not controlling those agents like you would a human identity, you're going to run into a pretty massive issue. And so it's conversations like that that I think are moments of pause for a leader to say, you know what, we do need to take some time and understand what are we doing here? How are we going to control this?
Hmm.
What tools are we going to put in place to arm our teams to be able to
Right.
have that level of control?
Absolutely. Which is interesting because I think with all of the number of data points that that you can bring into an organization to assess where your security posture is at, there can be a lot of noise. It's not noise; it's just a lot of data all at once that is
It
hard
is.
to parse through. So, if you looking at what you've seen with leaders of organizations and even cybersecurity leaders within organizations, what can they really assess or look at that would provide a more accurate view of what their posture is?
Gosh, I think that I think that some of the ways that they can distill information is if they are using any sort of seam that feeds the telemetry in and then layer on a tool like Security Copilot that can quickly determine is this real, is it not, so that we are not exhausting teams with alert overload. I think that that's a pretty easy. I mean, and within that tool alone, there is very quick executive summarization that can be
Hmm.
provided to show exactly what the tool has filtered out, exactly what is determined to be a true threat. And so I think executives can easily appreciate that. Like, I think that is a very fast way for executives to be able to see the value of layering that defense.
You've mentioned every agent has its own identity, and with identity still being a key factor in cybersecurity, do you see a reason for that? Right? Why identity remained the number one entry point for attackers?
I think that there's there's no question it's still number one, to your point. I think it can
Yeah.
be scaled easily. I think we still rely on passwords too much. I think that humans are involved and there is very sophisticated social engineering. I think there's more attack surface, like I mentioned. If you have agents that have proliferated to be
Hmm.
any sum over 1 to 1, you're fighting against more identities than you originally would have thought.
Hmm.
And I think candidly, like I was referencing before and having listened to your podcast previously, I think one consistent messaging is that getting back to the basics,
Yeah.
making sure is MFA in place? I mean, as late as 2024, which has been a little while. So I hope this statistic has improved. But,
Probably
59%
not.
I hold out
Probably not.
as a cybersecurity professional, I hold out hope. Like
Yeah.
59%.
Well, hope is not a
Positive, but
strategy.
Right. I throttle that a
gets
lot.
allows
Throttle
us
that.
to sleep at night, Danny. Allows us to
Yeah.
sleep at night.
That's exactly it. Hope is not a strategy. The stat was something like 59% of customers said that they were not covered with MFA. And when it's configured properly, it's going to work 99% of the time. So if you put those two statistics together, it paints a very, very clear picture. I think the last thing is making sure that you're allowing least privileged access, right? Zero trust model. If we are only allowing access for the least amount of time and the least amount of privilege, I think we'll all be in a better place. And again, while it seems basic, I know that statistically we understand that it's maybe not being executed as often as we would like. But the outcome is incredibly positive if it is.
Which is interesting that we're talking about identity-based and AI, because Microsoft's approach seems to be that why don't we just treat these agents as identities, and
As a
then
human
from that,
identity.
then exactly, and then we can take that identity and layer on top of it all of these control planes. So we can layer on top of it all the governance planes. So I think that's
That's right.
interesting that we approach that in that way when other organizations are not doing that. And I think that is a very powerful way to step forward when it comes to addressing identity with agents, especially with, because it used to be everything was LLMs and now it's agentic AI. Then it's going to be autonomous, right? I mean, that seems to be what's on the horizon there. So how do you answer that then if you're not looking at these autonomous agents as something of an identity? So I think that's an interesting point about
I
identity.
agree. And I don't think it varies. It doesn't vary much from Microsoft's kind of baseline on identity from the beginning, has always been that it is a baseline of the control plane. So if we are treating agents that way, we can enforce policy, we can audit, there will be audit trails, right? I definitely believe that the combination of tools that can be used if we do treat agents as non human identity is prolific. It's much more prolific than if we're trying to treat it differently. And I
agree.
think there are other organizations outside of us, the Cloud Security Alliance and the Center for AI Security, both recommend the same thing, treating
Yeah,
agents as human identity.
exactly.
Is is that because that attacker tactics have changed over the past, let's say, year or two, or not really? And it's just like you said earlier, the proliferation of identities and having more agents and more identities out there.
From an identity perspective, I would say the strategy on attack has remained similar. However, I think we have to acknowledge what's represented in Project Glasswing and how that threat vector injects a new level of caution that we will all have to have, and how we're going to have to match capability based on how threat will be used now. That we
I
have
am
tools that can very quickly
Hmm.
find vulnerability. They can chain vulnerability together. So I think we have to be incredibly astute and aware um, of those sorts of threat vectors that are introduced with AI models that have advanced cyber capabilities.
Right.
I'm sorry, Suzanne. What is Project Lastwing?
So that is the aggregation of entities who have been brought together based on the Claude Mythos preview and the different organizations that are working together from the backside to assure that customers are protected and others are protected as vulnerabilities are unearthed with these latest AI models that have incredibly powerful capabilities. And Microsoft is a participating company.
So this is a cross-industry project. This is not a Microsoft-only
Oh, no,
initiative.
not Microsoft only initiative.
Okay, well, thank you. Now, if among the customers you're working with, the organizations that you're working with, if you could advise them to fix one thing that would probably be relevant for the majority of them, what would that be? Is it something like simple as, like you've mentioned earlier, like activate your MFA, or is there more to it?
There's always more because defense in depth is the strategy that I would preach to
Right.
customers. I think I would start with things because we know things like there are 7,000 password attacks every second because we understand the volume and success that occurs in those particular types of attacks. I mean, it would be baseline things like, please, if you can, get away from passwords as quickly as you can.
Right.
Enabling MFA obviously is huge. I think as we do think about, what, again, referencing the future, things like keeping patching up to date. I mean, not continuing to use unsupported software because patching for those systems and software will not be available. And it will
Right.
be very, very difficult at the volume that these things will happen for customers who haven't done those basic things, and those basic things I do think go a long way.
Well, let's take the opposite side of that same coin. What should organizations or leaders stop doing then?
I would say I think the assumption that you can manually fight automated adversaries. I think that any assumption that a human will be able to keep pace. So anything that is being done manually, repetitive tasks that can't be automated. I do think reducing tool sprawl is
Yeah.
it's a huge one. I think it's something like most customers have 83 or 80 plus
Yes.
security tools. And it's
Yeah.
never to say that one single tool can do everything. But I do think where tools can be integrated in a platform solution, they give advantage that is multidimensional. It is not just the advantage of simplification or productivity because you can manage things from a single portal, but it's also economic, right? The economics of leveraging solutions that way. But I would say tool sprawl is a real thing and it contributes to just the volume of alerting and disparate places that teams have to go triage those things. So
Right.
if there's the ability to stop doing things manually where you can and use your most advanced human resources to look at the most critical things that they need to be looking at versus small things that probably don't need the human eye. And I think sometimes we do see checkbox exercises around compliance. So I've got this tool, I've got the tool, so that's good, I'm good, but the tool isn't configured correctly. Well, if the tool isn't configured correctly, it's not going to help. So I think having all those tools is amazing if they're being used to their maximum potential to keep the customer safe and protected.
Right.
That's something that we see very frequently, just given the breadth of our platform, customers taking advantage of everything that they can within a platform solution, whether it's Microsoft or otherwise, really, really stretching tools as far as you can, I think would be one thing that I would say, right? And then maybe that's not a stop, it's a start, but there are other stops woven in there.
Yeah, it's interesting that you do see a coalescing of all of these security services are coming together in a what seems to be a platformization of security. Kind of, it looks as though Microsoft's been taking the lead on this. We have one place that you can go for many of your security concerns, but you see the other hyperscalers that are coalescing and acquiring organizations so they can do that very same thing. And then, in the one hand, you have well, we can do better than Microsoft, but in the same note, they're also buying up all of these different best of price, I guess, best of breed
Sure.
to try to recreate what Microsoft already has in place. And you see that across the entire spectrum of cybersecurity market. So I think it's interesting. We are seeing that platformization rather than these exactly what you're talking about, these tools, which again, you you characterized excellently by saying there can be a misconfiguration and how to engineer them together, right?
Yes,
So even that becomes a big problem.
it
And
does.
Greg, just to add, the Palo Altos of the world, couple of years was okay. We provide this umbrella of solutions that you can now enjoy, and I'm excited for Microsoft to taking a leadership on that. This is one thing. The other thing is, and I think Suzanne, you alluded to that a little bit earlier. You need the manpower to manage all of those point solutions. So all of a sudden,
Correct.
it's just managing. Make sure you're moving away from a manual work and making sure that you reduce the cost for the organization of the number of people that you have dealing with those separated systems.
Absolutely. I think, like I did mention, I mean, there are many implications, especially for our small, medium customers, that small teams, sometimes 1 to 2 people wearing multiple hats, not just even security hats. And I think boiling the ocean with a lot of disparate solutions that don't speak to each other. To your
Right.
point, Greg, on integration, and then not feeding those tools into something like a seam that can help you delineate what's going on. Instead of you having to connect all of the dots across those toolings to create an incident path, leveraging something that helps you with that. Anything that goes back to simplifying and reducing time to remediation, time to detection, all of those things, I think Platform S solutions help dramatically with that.
When you have teams that are overwhelmed, right? When you're talking organizations, your customers, and they're telling our security teams are overwhelmed, is that the reason that they still stuck with too many alerts because they have too many systems that they're working with, too many point solutions that they're working with?
I would say yes, and they have not done something to help with that, to either automate things, to have
Yeah.
a review of the very remedial or redundant things that come through, or a fast way to look at something and determine, is this actually really something that even needs to be alerted on? The
Right.
converse of that is tools that can help elevate things quickly that actually do need attention. And so I think it's not as simple as, is it only because they have disparate tools or a multitude of tools? That absolutely contributes. But I think some folks have been very effective at making multiple tools work for them. I think it's incumbent upon security leadership to always be evaluating, are those tools still relevant for what we have to face today and tomorrow, specifically tomorrow? Because tomorrow is coming so much faster than it used to. The set of
Right.
tools or disparate solutions that you had and were leveraging and are very successful leveraging the last 5 years will not be the same set of tools that you are going to need for even the next 18 months to 2 years.
Right.
And so I think leadership should be looking at, what do we need to do to future proof and what do I need to do to save cost, because we always get that.
Right.
That is very common and we want to help our customers do that. It is amazing to me how frequently we see redundancy in tools and duplicate spend, and
Yeah.
sometimes it's simply just we don't have time to change it, we're comfortable with it, or we didn't even know you do that. So
Right.
it's incumbent upon us as your team to help educate you on that and to make sure
Yeah.
that if you want to know, we will educate you beginning to end on what's available to help with those sorts of challenges, because those are huge challenges for our customers, especially our smaller.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think it's important here that we acknowledge that all of these tools, all of this automation and making the getting avoiding this too many alerts scenario really gets in the way of with security teams. And I've experienced this myself when I worked in a SOC, is getting to that actionable security step. We've built a narrative, but ultimately the question becomes, what are we going to do about it?
Yes,
Right? You can sit around and talk about how you feel about the problem all you want, but if there's no actionable security, that becomes a problem. So
absolutely.
how does can you elaborate just a little bit more on how Microsoft can help teams or how they are helping teams get to that actionable security? And I know it's very similar to what we just asked about too many alerts, but when it comes to actually boiling down that incident into something actual, how does Microsoft help there?
I would say the most effective tool I've seen for that is Security Copilot. If the telemetry is feeding into Security Copilot, Security Copilot immediately provides you a list of recommendations on the next actions that you can take. That's quite huge. And I know in the work that we are doing to work on Project Glasswing, there will also be recommendations on that side of the equation on action that customers can take to improve their security posture. So I think there are multiple places across the Microsoft tooling that allow you very, very fast directive on action that can be taken. Some of that can be automated with policy at the baseline, but a tool like Security Copilot to me is a differentiator because it does allow even the person who's sitting overnight watching those alerts come in, if that's the case. And in some of our
Right.
customers, obviously there's not a person sitting there 24/7, but it does give them an avenue to take action or at least check in with someone more senior to say, should we take action this way? Here's the recommendation
Right.
that I received. So
Right.
I don't know how small shops can go without tools like that that help them quickly understand what is the next step that can be taken.
So I want to maybe zoom out a little bit and look at and look at the bigger picture and talk about how security is extremely important by itself, but more importantly, how it helps the decision maker to transform security into a business enabler rather than just, okay, this is another thing I need to deal with just to make sure my organization is not breached and I'm not dropping my pants in and drowning in lawsuits. So when you're when you're talking to executives, right?
I hate when that happens.
How do you frame security as a business enabler, and especially now with agentic security?
I think that there are a few ways to look at this. Number one thing that my team will do, and many teams at many vendors, so I like to give the broad view, like you said, but certainly my team will do this and adjacent teams at Microsoft will do this. We will help you build a case for the needed tool, a business case that internally, typically leaders have to go back and out of budget cycle requests are not always well received, right? Depending on what that ask is. But building a business case that is tangible and demonstrates the total cost of ownership, the ROI, what are we displacing? What is the opportunity in the future? What does this help us onboard? So if you think about agentic AI and you think if we have the right security posture in place, if we're using the right things to secure, we can onboard more agents who can help us be more productive. And we'll know exactly what they're doing. We'll know exactly what they're able to engage with and interact with. We'll have a path for audit. So I think explaining to leadership those things that are very critical to what they see their future business development being is critically important. So that's one thing I would say I would task every customer with tasking their team to go and build that case with them or for them. I would say in security, as unfortunately, sometimes we have to speak in cost of what does it look like if you do have an incident versus what you would be investing in this tool. And the reality is, so typically, you are going to spend far in excess of what you would spend on the tooling to bounce back from some sort of large event. Not to mention the percentage of customers you lose, because there's some pretty clear data on how many customers get lost post breach. It depends on what's involved with that, but there is certainly a trail of destruction that happens after an event like that.
Right.
And I go back to how does security enable that customer to adopt or utilize tooling for the business that is outside of the security tooling, but allows them to be able to leverage that tooling in a secure manner, right? Look at the enablement part of that. And what is that tooling that they're going to be able to use mean to the bottom line of the business? Those are all really critical ways to help security not be viewed as just a cost center, but as an enabler.
So when you are having those conversations and looking at this risk versus what the possible spend is, what language or metrics resonates most with, say, the non-technical stakeholders? So your executives who don't come from a technical background, what does that conversation tend to look like?
I think right now, and I'm just giving recent examples, and I know I keep going back to this, but because it's literally the conversation that I probably have had 6 times already this week is the business is keenly uh, interested in understanding how can they build agents? Like, how can they build agents within the Microsoft platform, outside of the Microsoft platform, and how can they bring it into the business for business benefit? And that quickly turns into, did you understand that, you're going to have oversight of that agent? Because not only if you're bringing all of these in and you're creating all of these, could you potentially have agent sprawl?
Right.
You will have agents that can access things that you have no visibility to. You won't know who owns the agent if you don't have the proper observability. So explaining those things to the business actually resonates rather quickly and is highly impactful because they are incredibly interested in how to use agentic AI for the benefit of the business. So again, it expands beyond that, but because that is literally the most common customer conversation I'm having right now. That's the one that stands out for sure.
When you have that conversation with the business side of the organization, do you find that they often have challenges to coordinate the shift from point solutions to more of a platform solution and having a business conversation around AI and security? Do you see there are any gaps between the business and the technical side?
I think the business typically immediately thinks in terms of what they need to accomplish mission.
Hmm.
And I understand that. I think that the customers who I see who can accelerate quickly have a very strong line of communication between the business and the security team and whoever is manifesting in the background how that solution is brought in. So their IT teams and their security teams, and there's constant communication between those groups. I think it is much harder when there is disparity. I do see that. I observe that when there is disparity or teams across the business, security, and IT are not being incredibly communicative, we run
Mhm.
into a lot of challenges on
Yeah.
any form of adoption for platform or otherwise. And siloed is difficult. I think siloed is going to continue to be more and more difficult because of the speed at which things are going to move. I think businesses are going to have to become more integrated in conversation with their security teams. Yeah, there's no question.
And this can be really difficult, especially because what's required a lot of the times in those situations is a really strong push from leadership, right? I mean, if you're going to break silos, the key tool to do that is to get leadership buy-in and really have it come top down so
Top
that
down.
changes that culture from something silo to something interdependent or cooperative.
Absolutely. I will observe also because in our segment specifically, we deal with a tremendous number of companies who are in merger and acquisition mode. And that very much exacerbates that because of just the volume at which they are ingesting or shedding companies can really complicate that. And I think in those cases, tremendous partners help a lot. Partners who go through that motion frequently, I would advocate highly. We have a huge partner network at Microsoft, and I always advocate that customers have a strong partner relationship as well as a strong Microsoft relationship, and that the trifecta of the customer, the partner, and Microsoft all communicate with each other as well.
I didn't plan to ask you about this. I do want to we're almost at the top of the hour, and I do want to squeeze in that question. On May 1st, Microsoft started pushing the new E7 license.
Yes.
There are significant changes from a security standpoint to compare to, let's say, E5, definitely E3 and the business premium. Do you have, and I know we're just at the beginning of this new license, have you came across any questions, challenges, requests for information from customers, and how is that working out?
Oh my goodness. That goes back to what I was commenting on as far as that is the conversation of the day.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
this is the
Yes, it
first
is.
new bundled SKU. Sometimes cringe when I say that, especially to our cyber professionals, because that's very licensing speak, and everyone knows that licensing is everyone's favorite topic. But what I will say is, customers, it has been 15 years since the launch of Microsoft 365 E5. I believe it's 15. It's close. If it's not 15 exactly, it's very close. And in its form, like it had a couple forms before it was, I think, named E5. And I remember because I was there when we were still doing CoreCal and eCal. E7 represents a huge amount of excitement for customers. They want to understand the implications. If I have to boil it down very, very quickly, two things. Ultra in its advanced form and Agent 365, which I know I spoke about a little bit earlier. And then, of course, the Copilot components are what would differentiate the E7 licensing from the Microsoft 365 E5. So yes, two major advanced security components in there, and also the catalyst of Copilot. So if they're investing in Copilot and they are looking to manage the agents that will be created there or in other platforms, Agent 365 is a huge catalyst. And then also the Entra Suite is the thing that rounds it out. So identity protection again. We're going back to identity.
Indeed.
Always.
It's nice to come full circle. That's nice.
Yes.
So maybe final question. Considering everything that we spoke to and everything that you're going through on a daily basis, if a security leader would be listening to this episode, and why wouldn't they? If you can tell them, listen, you need to make one change, not tomorrow, but today, what would you tell them to focus on first?
It would be at the top of mind is probably the consideration for how we will move forward to match adversaries who are moving at machine speed with agentic AI, right? Like I think you cannot pass this moment. And as a security leader, I think you want to have a full grasp of what your partners and vendors are doing to help. And there's three primary ways that Microsoft is looking to help customers with this. The first is patching. So taking these advanced models and working them into our software development cycle. And then as part of our regular release of patching, that will flow through that way. I think posture, like understanding your posture, using security exposure management, and there is a Secure Now is currently, folks can go look at it. There is a blog that happy to anyone who's interested, if they want to ping me, there was a blog on April 22nd, I believe. That is the piece that will allow customers to, it will provide guidance and actions that can be taken to proactively improve their security posture. And Entra ID is what's required there. And then the third part is new within Defender, being able to detect and a multi-model AI-driven scanning harness that will help customers discover, validate, and address vulnerabilities. And that's expected to be in preview in June. So I would say read about that, understand, and call us to have a conversation. We would love to have a conversation about those things. That is top of mind.
Well, with that, thank you very much, Suzanne.
Yeah,
Our time is up for the day. And
my pleasure to speak.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I want to thank our listeners for tuning into CyberWise. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. And until next time, stay vigilant.
Hit the bell, please.
Stay informed and stay CyberWise. Thank you, guys.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Let's go. Greg's got the news. Danny's got the flair. One talks the cloud, the other's out there. Service